Welcome to my next Lost. Season 5 episode review video. Before I get into that, though, pretty important, if you are caught up to the point where I am and rewatching or watching Lost, or you're just not entirely sure, then you definitely need to take the initiative and pay attention to the episode's title, which of course I'll mention, as well as put in the description. If that happens to be the case, you find that you're not caught up, it would be my recommendation that you don't watch this detailed review any further to avoid any potential spoilers. And full disclosure, I've already seen the TV series Lost 3 other times. It's in my top 5 favorite TV series of all time, but I'm not the only one that's currently watching Lost. The legendary Crazy Coffee Man, who you see in the comment section for Breaking Bad, Lucifer, Dexter, Dexter Original Sin, Dexter New Blood, and some physical media related videos, is actually watching Lost for the very first time. So join us on the journey and let's discuss this awesome and amazing show in the comment section. However, I don't want to see any spoilers past this episode. So with all that said, this will be Lost, Season 5, Episode 7. The title of this episode is called The Life and Death of Jeremy Bentham, and this will be my review reaction recap after just finishing watching the episode. So we start with our new characters, which is now the current time, apparently. Caesar is going through Ben's office in the Hydra, and he sees a copy of the 1954 Life magazine with a cover story of a hydrogen bomb. He also finds a file that contains one of Daniel Russo's maps, one of the pages from Daniel Faraday's journal, and Daniel Faraday's map. Daniel's map has mysteriously been augmented to include hieroglyphics since the last time it was seen, and Caesar comes across a loaded gun under a desk, and he quickly takes it and hides it in his bag. Then our other new character, Ilana, then comes in and asks him if he's found anything, and he says no. When she presses him, he takes a flashlight out of his sack and tosses it to her, not mentioning the gun. She tells him that there is a man on the beach in a suit who was not on the plane. On the way back to the flight, the 316 camp, Ilana and Caesar walk on a gravel path. The plane sits on a path at the angle, but is intact still. When they arrive to the camp, they meet the man who is wearing a Azura Airways blanket over his head like a hood, and then this person introduces themselves as John Locke. Huh? The magic of the island. Locke stands at the edge of the surf, gazing towards the main island. Christian Shepherd's shoes lie on the sand nearby. Ilana walks up to Locke and introduces himself or herself and offers him a mango, which he muses may be the best mango he has ever tasted. Locke inquires about the two outrigger canoes which sit nearby on the shore, and Ilana says that the canoes were already there and that there had been a third one, but the pilot and a woman left in one of them during the night. Ilana then asks why Locke is dressed so nicely, and Locke surmises that he was to be buried in that suit. Locke says that he doesn't remember being on the plane, but he does remember dying, and then Ilana looks at him strangely and then walks away. Locke, and then we go back to a flashback where we've already seen this part where Locke realigns the frozen wheel, and Christian tells him to say hello to his son, and Locke says, "Who's your son?" as the flashlight takes him out or takes him away. And then we have a flash forward with Locke appearing in the Tanzanian desert 3 years after Oceanic 6, after the Oceanic 6 left the island. He vomits upon arriving. He is lying in a direct view of a surveillance camera. He repeatedly calls for help towards the camera to no avail. At night, he is recovered by a pickup truck full of men who roughly bring him to a poorly equipped rural hospital, arriving in the daytime. The doctor there reduces his open fracture and sets his leg while Abaddon watches from across the room. Locke passes out from the pain. He is wakened by Charles Whitmore, who is sitting by his hospital bed. Whitmore tells Locke that he had a specialist flown in to do a better job of setting his leg. Whitmore relates how he was 17 years old when he first met John Locke on the island, intrigued by the fact that Locke looks no different now than when he originally met him over 50 years ago. For Whitmore, he asks Locke how long it's been since he walked into the camp to speak to Richard Alpert. Locke replies that it has only been 4 days. Locke confirms that The camera in the desert is Whitmore's, asking how Whitmore knew he would be there, and Whitmore replies, "That's the exit." And then Whitmore explains that he was the leader of the others before being exiled by Benjamin Linus. Hence, Locke should trust Whitmore, as they have the same goals in mind for protecting the island. Whitmore assumes out loud that Locke was exiled by Ben as well, but Locke corrects him, saying that he left voluntarily to bring his friends back to the island. Locke mentions that Ben left the island before he did, and Locke questions why Whitmore would want Locke and the others back on the island. Whitmore says that there is a war coming, and if Locke is not back, the wrong side is going to win. And then Whitmore and Locke sit outside the hospital, and Whitmore tells Locke that he will help him find the Oceanic Six. And Whitmore gives him dossiers on their location, as he had been keeping an extensive eye on them. He also offers Abaddon as a driver and introduces him to John Locke. Whitmore concludes their meeting by giving Locke a large amount of money, a mobile phone, which Whitmore can be contacted by dialing 23, and finally a Canadian passport with the identity of Jeremy Bentham on there. Whitmore explains that Bentham was a 19th century philosopher, and that Whitmore chose the name to keep in theme with Locke's birth name. John Locke is skeptical of Whitmore's offers, but accepts the help, and he and Abaddon drive off towards the airport to fly to Santo Domingo. Continuing our flash forward, Saeed is seen helping to construct a school as part of a charity called Build Our World. A construction foreman alerts Saeed of Locke's presence. Locke speaks to him, but Saeed refuses to return. He explains that Ben had manipulated him for 2 years into protecting the rest of the Oceanic Six, and it was only by leaving the island that he finally got to marry Nadia, with whom he spent 9 months before her death. Saeed questions if the only reason that Locke wants to return to the island is because he has nowhere else to go. Before leaving, John Locke tells Saeed that he can be contacted under the name Jeremy Bentham, staying at the Westerfield Hotel in Los Angeles, just in case Saeed ever changes his mind. Saeed mentions that John can always come back to Santo Domingo to find him, just in case John Locke ever wants to do any real good in the world. Continuing on, John and Abaddon stop opposite a school in uptown New York. While waiting, John asks Abaddon to locate Helen Norwood for him. Helen, of course, was his love interest that left him because he kept choosing the wrong thing. And Abaddon asks if she is an old girlfriend, a question to which John Locke doesn't reply. As the school bell rings, Locke asks Abaddon to help him out of the car. A group of students leave the school, and amongst them is Walt. Locke waves to Walt, who promptly leaves his friends and crosses the street to talk to John Locke. Locke asks why Walt isn't surprised to see him, and Walt explains that he'd been having dreams of John Locke in a suit on the island, surrounded by people who wanted to hurt him. John Locke says that it is good that they are just dreams, to which Walt gives him a nervous and confused look. And Walt also asks about his father, whom he suspects of returning to the island after dropping out of contact for 3 years. John Locke lies and tells Walt that the last he had heard of Michael, he was on a freighter. Walt asks John why Locke came to visit him, and Locke lies again, telling Walt he just wanted to make sure he was okay, when he really came to tell Walt that Michael had died. After Walt leaves, Abaddon asks why John didn't try to convince Walt to return, and John answers by saying that Walt had been through enough, and that he only needs to convince one of the Oceanic Six to return to the island, and after that, the rest will follow. As the pair return to the car, Benjamin Linus is revealed to have been watching them from across the street. Continuing on, when John first rolls up to Hurley in his wheelchair, Hurley is seen drawing a picture of an Egyptian sphinx. Hurley, completely nonchalant, asks Locke why he is in a wheelchair, to which Locke replies that he fell down a hole. Hurley asks him, is this how he died? Assuming John Locke is dead, as he had been having regular conversations with dead people. However, Hurley asks the nurse if he is talking to a man in a wheelchair, and she confirms it, letting Hurley believe Locke is alive. He asks him how he got off the island, and Locke attempts to persuade Hurley to return to the island. The attempt fails when Hurley sees Abaddon and panics. refusing, insisting that that guy is evil. Hurley recounts how Abaddon posed as an employee of Oceanic Airlines at the Santa Rosa Hospital. After Locke returns to the car, he finally acknowledges that he recognizes Abaddon as the hospital orderly who originally told him to go on a walkabout. When Locke asks Abaddon what he really does for Whitmore, Abaddon says his job is to help people get to where they need to get to. Continuing on, Locke is at Kate's house, who refuses to return in spite of the consequences to those still on the island. Kate tells John Locke that she believes the only reason he wanted to stay on the island was because he didn't love anybody. Locke disagrees and talks about his relationship with Helen, which didn't work out because he was angry and obsessed. Kate sarcastically replies, "Look how far you've come." Locke leaves the house and promptly asks Abaddon about his quest to find Helen. And Abaddon states that he hasn't found her, that perhaps she moved away or changed her name. Angrily, Locke questions him about this, as Abaddon had no trouble locating all the Oceanic Six in locations across the world. Continuing this flash forward, Locke and Abaddon are in a cemetery before a stone memorializing Helen, who died on April 8th, 2006. Abaddon states that she died of a brain aneurysm, and John laments that Helen loved him, and if he stayed, they would have been together. Abaddon states that it wouldn't change anything. She's still dead, but Locke seems unconvinced. Abaddon reasons that Helen is where she is supposed to be, and that Locke is destined to end up on the island. Locke questions whether he believes that everything is predetermined and that he doesn't have a choice. Abaddon asks whether Richard Alpert's prediction that John must die is predetermined or whether it's a choice. Locke, confused, wonders aloud how it could possibly be his choice to die. As Abaddon is loading John's wheelchair into the car's trunk, he is shot 3 times by an unseen assailant. Locke climbs Hurley into the driver's seat. In a blind panic, John recklessly drives away, ultimately driving through a red light, and is struck by 2 cars at the intersection. He is knocked unconscious by the impact. Continuing on with this flash forward, John Locke wakes up in the hospital bed with a disheveled Jack Shepard sitting next to him. Locke asks how Jack found him, and Jack replies that Locke was in a car accident. He was brought to his hospital. When Locke says it's fate, Jack says it's nothing more than a coincidence, much to Locke's dismay. Jack refuses to accept that it is their destiny to return and asks Locke to seriously question whether or not he is truly as special as he believes. Jack goes to leave, but Locke stops him, telling him that his father says hi, having ruled Christian out as Saeed's father or Hurley's father. Jack states that Christian died 3 years ago in Australia, but Locke says he didn't look dead to him. Locke implores Jack to come back to the island with him, as he is the only one that the others will follow. Jack angrily tells Locke to leave him and the other survivors alone, and that none of them were ever important. While in his room at the Westerfield Hotel, Locke writes his suicide note addressed to Jack and places the envelope in his pocket. He throws his cell phone that Whitmore gave him into the trash can. He takes a length of extension cord, ties a noose, climbs on a table, and is about to hang himself when there is a knock at the door. He ignores it, but after a few knocks and yells, Ben forces the door open and enters the room. Ben begs him to stop, saying that he only wants to help John. Ben admits to shooting Abaddon, as according to Ben, he is very dangerous as an employee of Charles Whitmore, and he would have killed John Locke if Ben hadn't killed him first. Whitmore, Ben claims, was using John to get back to the island and is the reason that Ben moved in the first place. Ben then unties the extension cord, telling John Locke that he is important. Ben offers his help to a distraught Locke, who is convinced that he is incapable of being a leader. Ben tells Locke that Jack booked a return flight from LA to Sydney, which proves Jack's change of attitude. Ben tells Locke that he has too much work to do to die and suggests contacting Sun. Locke says that he promised Jin he would not contact her and shows Ben the wedding ring Jin gave to him. Ben is surprised that Jin is alive. Locke states that he knows what he must do next. He must contact a woman who lives in Los Angeles named Eloise Hawking. At the mention of her name, Ben is visibly startled. Locke asks if Ben knows the woman, and Ben quietly confirms their acquaintance. Suddenly, Ben strangles John Locke with the cord, eventually killing John Locke. He later hangs Locke in a staged suicide and cleans the hotel room of his own fingerprints. Before leaving, he sees Jin's ring and takes it with him. Standing in the doorway, Ben says out loud, "I'll miss you, John. I really will." Then he leaves, apparently unaware of the suicide note in John Locke's pocket. Now back to our time frame that we're dealing with now. Locke visits Caesar in the office in the Hydra. He explains briefly about the Dharma Initiative, whose logo appears on the document Caesar is reading. Caesar questions Locke's knowledge of this, and Locke replies that he has been on the island before for over 100 days. Caesar, confused but curious, asks John Locke if he can explain what he witnessed on the plane, describing how he was sitting next to a heavy-set man with curly hair who disappeared during the flash of light, and that the others of the crash also reported seeing passengers disappear. Realizing from his description that Caesar is talking about Hurley, Locke responds that he now has a better idea of how he came to be on the island. Locke asks whether everyone apart from the people who disappeared are accounted for. Caesar says that they are, other than those that were injured in the crash. And then he leads John Locke to a makeshift infirmary where the injured passengers are resting. John Locke moves between them, closely looking at each person. He seems disappointed until he comes to the last of the injured, who is revealed to be Benjamin Linus, and who John Locke identifies as the man who killed me. And that's what ends this episode of Lost. So I'm only going to give the episode an 8.0 out of 10. Ben really liking John Locke, and then because he mentioned Eloise Hawking, Ben decides to strangle Locke. I didn't like how that played out. I would have rather had a more interesting death of John Locke. Now, we'll still see Locke for the rest of the series, but obviously John Locke is dead. He's really dead. He's not alive. That was John Locke. He was actually strangled, but he does appear for the rest of the series. Anyway, my character of the episode is going to be John Locke, and the secondary characters that I really liked, Benjamin Linus, and I'm going to give special recognition to Walt, because we haven't seen much of Walt, and it was nice to see him. The reason why we don't see a lot of Walt after season 2 is because the actor grew way too much, and they wanted a little kid to play Walt, so they kind of had to sprinkle him in a little bit here and there, or use other footage that wasn't used in the season to make him appear. So you've heard everything that I have to say. Now it's your turn. If you're a fan of Lost and you want to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, please make sure that you Hulk smash the like button, share the video with a friend, put this video on any one of your social media platforms. Don't forget to sound off in the comment section and interact with me and the legendary Crazy Coffee Man. What are your thoughts on the episode? What would you score the episode? And who is your character or characters of the episode? And then last but certainly not least, don't forget to hit that sub button. You're watching the video anyway. Subscribe to the channel. Help me get over 100,000 subscribers. Join the team, show your damn support, and be a part of something special. And you never know what you're going to see on JDev TV.